Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It's Friday. We are just under a week away from the NFL draft, so we are going to be diving in and talking about Superflex prospects and getting ready. But Dennis, what is your level of excitement for the NFL draft, which kicks off on Thursday in Green Bay?
I am stoked. I am waiting with bated breath to see which defensive lineman the Detroit Lions pick in the first round. Though I did just see a mock draft that had the Lions taking Josh Simmons, the Ohio State left tackle. They do need a youth movement on their offensive line. And with Taylor Decker at left tackle and solid starting lineup across the board there, I think Penei Sewell is the young guy. And he's in his third or fourth year now. But the rest of them are second, third contract players. Having Taylor Decker at left tackle going into this season would allow Josh Simmons to not be rushed back. He's played some guard, so when he does come back, depending on how that line is playing, he could get a little playing time subbing in on the left side at guard or tackle. But mostly they've been mostly mocked. Any one of, Michael, who's the Georgia guy? Michael, is it Williams? The Marshall guy, Mike Green, Donovan Azariaki.
A bunch of IDP things. So
yeah. So they've been mocked an awful lot of those edge players, which pairing with Aiden Hutchinson, it feels like they're looking to probably bring Zadarius Smith back, but at a reasonable cost. And they're going to wait and see what their draft looks like. I think that will dictate what happens with Zadarius Smith. Obviously, I'm also excited to see what the Browns do it too. So that's feeling more and more and more and more like Travis Hunter, which I'm fine with. Then the question becomes, do they trade back up in the first to grab a Jackson Dart or a Shadur Sanders if he's falling? I don't know. I feel like, Cam Ward is the quarterback that feels like he's got a ceiling in this class. The rest of them all feel, when we go through our top 25, you'll notice mine is fairly bereft of quarterbacks. And then there's a bunch of Ohio State players that could go in the first, along with Simmons, Emeka Egbuka. Jack Sawyer's fallen probably to the third round. He was earlier in the draft season was being predicted as a first rounder. I think he's probably better suited as a third rounder. JT Tuimoloau has fallen out of the first round a little bit. But you got Emeka Egbuka. Seems like I'm missing somebody else that's been – Donovan Jackson's been a fringe first rounder at guard or tackle. So there's some Ohio State stuff to keep an eye on as well.
Well, There is not a ton of news, but a little bit of news. The Ravens kind of there's some news came out. They've been scouting kickers a lot, which doesn't seem too good for Justin Tucker. Scouting kickers in the draft, which doesn't seem good for Justin Tucker. And they pressed the GM a little bit about the long-term future of Mark Andrews. He was pretty non-committal. I think you and I had mentioned when we talked about dynasty tight ends, we were getting a little, if you have Andrews, you're probably getting a little more nervous about long term. Did this make you more nervous, less nervous, about the same?
So with Andrews, my thoughts are he's probably a coin flip to get traded. I don't think it's more likely than not, but by no means is it going to be surprising if it happens. They do like Isaiah Likely a ton, and he's shown, given his opportunities, and Charlie Kolar out of Iowa State, I think, or is he another Iowa guy? I forget. Has played really well when given the opportunity. So it feels like if they can get good value for Andrews, they may be willing to take it. And if he can go somewhere that uses the tight end at a pretty good clip, then I think, and he's probably what? You're probably going to get a fourth rounder for him. He's 29 years old.
Oh, you mean in an actual NFL? I was like, in Dynasty, I think you can still get more than a fourth. No, yeah. And I mean, the question I would have too, that we talked about a pretty decent crop of young tight ends. There are, there are five that people seem to be circling, but then there's another three that have, at various points drawn interest, between Ferguson. I've seen some people jumping on Gunnar Helm, so do you want to waste a fourth round pick taking an expensive veteran, or are you?
So to me, it feels like if I'm a playoff team, I'm picking late in the fourth round. And if I'm picking a tight end there, the opportunity that they're going to be a significant contributor this year probably isn't really high. So if I can take, the 28th pick in the fourth round and send it for Mark Andrews, who I can plug and play in my offense as a beast receiver. I don't know who's, Jacksonville's in the market for a tight end. I know we like Brenton Strange. And I don't know, pairing Mark Andrews with Brian Thomas Jr., that could be very potent and give, I know that Evan Ingram has performed well in his time in Jacksonville, but Andrews and Thomas could be very, very good for Trevor Lawrence. I'm trying to think who's at the end towards the end of the
And
first.
he is in the last year of his contract. I think the question is how much salary another team would have to absorb too, because 16.9 is the almost 17 million is the cap hit that Baltimore is going to take right now. I don't know if you'd have to absorb all of that. Looks like Baltimore would have about 10 million dead cap to deal.
Is Jim going to do John a favor and take him off his hands like he did J.K. Dobbins? Now, I get it. Dobbins was a free agent, but
I don't know if. Yeah, I mean, I guess if they miss out, but I don't know. They went and signed Tyler Conklin, which feels like if they were going to pursue a veteran trade, I think they're more likely to take a young player to pair there. It's just a feeling I have.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. It feels to me like if he gets traded, it's going to be to a contender that feels like this is a weapon that can put me over the top. Let me look at get to the back. So, I don't think Philadelphia is going to, they're trying to get rid of Dallas Goedert. So I don't think they're going to go and trade for Mark Andrews.
I mean,
Kansas City
the
still
one
got
I could see
Kelsey
doing
there.
it is maybe in Indianapolis if Warren and Loveland go before them, because now there's a lot of talk. The Bears are looking at tight ends at 10. I have thought the Jets might be a spot at 7. Let's say before you get to the Colts, that their top 2 go off. They're not going to go with Taylor or Arroyo at 14. That's too high. And then do you pivot, because they seem pretty bent on getting a better pass catching tight end? Do you pivot and then?
I mean, the Rams, Matthew Stafford's been known to, they did pick up Devontae and they've got Puka, so it does feel like maybe not enough ball to go around.
Well, they also have Higbee will be back now off of injury, and they signed Colby Parkinson last year that they like, and tight end has never really been a big part of what they're doing. So I think that feels less likely, but I could see maybe a Seattle. Fance in the last year of his contract, nobody really knows exactly what they're doing. McDonald has that Baltimore connection and experience. There are teams that want tight ends, whether they want to. I think you're right that it would have to probably be some contender that saw that as what would push them over the top. And I think that kind of a trade is more likely to happen at the NFL trade deadline than during the draft. After you see injuries and how things shake out, and you're looking at it and you're like, man, if we could only solve this, And Baltimore, I still think, has to be cognizant of their own window a little bit. DeAndre Hopkins isn't a spring chicken that you put out there with Zay Flowers. Do you want to go all in on trying to make a run? You think you were really close last year. Better to have 2 good tight ends than one and a guy you like. You are right. Kohler was Iowa State, but I don't know. I don't think he's necessarily going to move. I think it's more that they aren't going to bring him back. And that's where, from a dynasty standpoint, if I'm a contending team, I'm riding it for one last run in Baltimore. But if you're not a contender, I would look to move him somewhere, because you're going to talk about a guy who's going to be 30 going into next year and probably not back in Baltimore if you begin that journeyman stage of your career. So are you ever going to get that kind of volume again?
If you're a contender, what will you give up to go get Mark Andrews?
I'm still not going higher than a second, because
how high would you go? 201 or 209?
Well, if you're a contender, you probably don't have a top of the second round. So
depends, wheel and deal.
Well, honestly, if I'm the top of the second round, I might be looking at seeing if I can get Colson Loveland, because that's right around where we think he's probably likely in a Superflex draft to go anywhere from 110 to 203. So, I mean, if you were in that range, why would you, maybe that's what you do instead. Andrews probably is another guy Andrews and Kelsey are probably guys that are going to move best somewhere in your dynasty season when a team realizes that they're completely screwed.
Or wait, maybe that team is my reset. But
well, like when you realize you can win a title, but your tight end options are, you tried to bank on some young guys or some streamers, like people that went into last season rolling with Dalton Kincaid thinking they were set. A lot of them moved to get, I saw a lot of people that had Kincaid or Evan Ingram, or people that got knocked out with injury that then made moves to grab Kelsey or an Ingram down the stretch because they wanted to make a playoff run. That's probably your best shot right now too, or much like I think I think Andrews is more likely to get traded at the NFL trade deadline or post draft than he is during the draft. I think you're more likely to get a decent value post rookie draft or during the season than you are pre-rookie draft before people, when people think that they can get, because this is the time of year where everybody thinks they can get everything, or like in the one dynasty league I'm in, I think De'Ami Brown's their new answer. I saw somebody trade De'Ami in a 14-team PPR league, traded De'Ami Brown in 306 to get Mike Evans. And the justification I was given is, well, De'Ami Brown's going to have at least 800 yards and 5+ touchdowns. He's the wide receiver too for the Jaguars. And I was like, really? Really? So this is maybe not the best time to get grounded and rational trades done. So,
Right.
Couple of guys that may move or have moved on. The Dolphins have given Jalen Ramsey permission to seek a trade. Looks like he may be working himself off another team. What a shock. Meanwhile, Tyron Smith and Ryan Ramczyk, a couple of veteran tackles, have decided to retire, as has cornerback Patrick Peterson. Anything strike you about this news? I imagine that's a big blow for an already middling New Orleans Saints offensive line.
Well, he didn't play. Ramczyk didn't play all of 2024, and he's been dealing with, I think, a degenerative hip condition.
But they had to hope that maybe he could come back. Their line hasn't been good.
They've been trying to address it. I know they drafted, Tyler, was it Tyler Smith? They drafted a guard, I thought, named Smith. They've been trying to bring in some offensive linemen, though not at premium picks, more, second, third, fourth rounder guys, I think, to try to rebuild that line. Tyler Guyton, no, he's in Dallas.
No, I'm looking at Taisi Fuyaga. They took last year. He was a rookie, and Josiah Azarim was a rookie, and Kyle Hergel was a rookie guard.
Do they have a guy named Smith on their line?
They do not.
Oh, okay. All right. No, I think Talisi Fuyaga is who I was thinking.
Yeah, and I think they took him in the first round. He's a tackle.
Yeah. So, they do have to. New Orleans has been playing cap shenanigans for so long. Their cap situation is so bad, and they just keep kind of moving things around. And so a lot of positions will get old, and they're trying to patchwork it. And there was a time when, Drew Brees would, keep it together because he was Drew Brees and he was able to do some things. But they're, losing Ramczyk, who was I think he was second team All-Pro twice and first team All-Pro once. And he was voted to the All-Rookie team as a rookie. Definitely a blow for them. They do need offensive line help. Tyron Smith, he's battled injuries for the past several seasons, but one of the most talented left tackles I think we've seen. I saw somebody posted a clip on Twitter of him at USC where he pulled out to go around to the right, leading the running back, was basically outrunning the running back, two-handed a guy that was trying to cut him, two-handed him to the ground while he leaped over him, hurdled him, and hit the next guy to open up the hole for the run. It was just somebody that big, you just shouldn't have that kind of athleticism. I wish I could remember who had posted it. It was a pretty phenomenal display of athleticism. And Patrick Peterson, man, isn't he like 66 or something?
I think he's younger than Tyron Smith, but he's 34.
He's definitely lost a step.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's time.
He and Tyron Smith are the same age. They play. They're both 34. They probably came in at the same time. Let's see. Ramczyk is only 30, so a little tough. But been beat up. Sometimes you got to know when to walk away. But Peterson and Tyron Smith, both returned to their original teams to retire. Smith retired as a Cowboy, and Peterson retired as a Cardinal. So be interesting to see how they go. Well, we have the draft, as we mentioned, starts a week from yesterday. So our last two pre-draft shows today, we're going to talk top 25 pre-draft Superflex rankings, and then Monday's show we are going to do a couple of different mock drafts, a 1QB and a Superflex that we'll take a look at to see where the values are heading into the draft, and of course we'll see what surprises always await us there. Dennis, you and I both have the same number one, which is Ashton Jeanty. I think the only question that I would ask about that is there? I think he's 101 in all formats. Obviously, we're doing Superflex rankings. If it was non-Superflex rankings, you're certainly liking him up there. But I would take him 101 in a Superflex draft. Even if I needed a quarterback, I still think that would be a better pick than going Cam Ward or even Hunter or McMillan, who are kind of the other guys floating around up there. But do you feel pretty solidly that if you have the 101, you should be taking Ashton Jeanty?
Yeah, I think you should. I think there will be some dogma zealots. It's Superflex and you have to take a quarterback that are going to plant their flag and say, I'm going to take Cam Ward. He's the 101 QB. He's been through adversity being a 0-star recruit, learned 3 different offenses in his time in college, phenomenal athlete, big arm, can do all the things. So there'll be some people that are going to kind of go with that dogma or potentially draft him out of need as opposed to Ashton Jeanty. I know a couple of years ago, I was in a situation where I had the 101 in 2 or 3 different leagues, and I was early in rebuilds. And Bijan Robinson was the clear number 1 pick. And I traded from 1 to 2 and drafted Anthony Richardson. It's not looking so good right now.
And you're still in rebuild.
Still in rebuild. Yeah, it's not looking so good right
Much
now.
like the Colts, you're still in rebuild.
That being said, my team wasn't in a position that drafting Bijan Robinson with, obviously a shorter shelf life than the typical quarterback. Even when you have somebody like a talent like Bijan Robinson, they're probably, an elite running back isn't going to play as long as an elite quarterback. And, Richardson kind of dinged me with the, Dynasty Nerds put out a study they did a few weeks ago when they were breaking down quarterbacks about, if they played 35 games in college, the success, it's a much more of a harbinger for success than if they play less. And Richardson was 14 games, substantially less. In the Mitch Trubisky school there, the Achilles Smith for you old heads. No, Jeanty's number 1. He's a outstanding running back. He 5'9", 216 pounds. 5'9", 211. Plays low, plays all 3 downs. Even at that size in college, he's been able to wear teams down. I think he's going to be a little more, he's going to have to get over trying to run big dudes over. The NFL is, at his size, he'll be able to do it for a while. But we've seen a lot of, 210-pound bangers come in that just break down after a few seasons because they can't take that beating. But we've seen 225, 230-pound bangers hold on for, 7, 8, 9 years. So, Jeanty's fast. He's a good receiver. Strong, good lower body. So, he's a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal player. And if I'm at the 101, I got to be honest, I don't think this is a year where I would be looking to trade from 101 to 102 to take Cam Ward. Maybe it's because I feel burned by Anthony Richardson, and because Ward played so many more games, that likelihood isn't quite there. But I think I'd roll even in that situation. I'd stay at the 101 and go with Ashton Genty.
Now, you and I both have a couple of receivers ahead of the first quarterback, even in our Superflex rankings. We just did the receiver episode last Friday. You have Hunter 1, McMillan 2. I had McMillan 1, Hunter 2. We both have them ahead. I could see a case for, if quarterback is where you're really hurting, taking him at 2 or 3. But I think it seems like you feel the same way, that the value is probably in taking either Travis Hunter or Ted McMillan.
Yeah, I mean, I have Hunter listed in the same tier as Genty. They should probably be in their own tiers, because I just think Hunter is better than McMillan or Ward. I don't think you're going to take either one of those over Hunter. It feels like Hunter's going to Cleveland, and Andrew Berry has said, yes, he's going to play both ways, but we see him as a receiver first. So, they're going to get him the ball. It doesn't matter if he's playing defense or offense. He gets the ball. That's what he does. Racks up interceptions, racks up receptions. He's fast, good leaper, got a great catch radius, pretty good route runner. And so I to me, I don't see, and I could end up being so wrong on this, it isn't even funny, but I just don't see where he spends the majority of his time on defense. I think he's too much of a weapon on offense. He's too good of a receiver on offense. I mean, probably 24, 25 teams in the NFL, you put him on those teams, he's either the best or vying for the best wide receiver on the team.
I think the question is whether he pitches a fit, because the discussions this week, where he said he'd just assume retire if a team's not going to let him play full-time both ways. Give me a break.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the, that's what we have to see. I think the other thing is, honestly, we feel pretty certain Hunter is going to Cleveland. I mean, it seems pretty certain. McMillan, there's a range of places he could go, some of which might be pretty appealing in terms of the kind of volume he could get. I mean, everybody says Hunter is going to automatically be the number one in Cleveland. Perhaps that's true. I'm no gigantic fan of Jerry Jeudy, so that wouldn't break my heart. But I also have some questions about Cleveland's passing offense. And honestly, if Hunter goes to Cleveland and McMillan goes to Dallas, could we very much end up with you're a fool if you take Neighbors above Marvin Harrison, and then after 1 year, we're looking at the production and the production potential going, this kind of Marvin Harrison may be the better receiver, but he definitely didn't land in the better passing offense.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of noise this week about is it Bidwell not being enamored with Kyler Murray? So feels like he's running the clock ticking there.
I mean, he picks Kyler. I feel the same way about him having a change of heart there as I do about Jerry Buss when he said maybe I shouldn't have let go of Shaq in favor of Kobe. Yeah, maybe you freaking shouldn't have, but that's the bed you made, and you need to fluff the sheets and figure out how to get through the evening, because you moved Cliff Kingsbury and said that he was holding your man back. You gave him a huge extension. Murray, even in this quarterback market, like that doesn't strike me as a Pittsburgh move. Maybe he needs to hope the Giants would want to trade for him and he could get the number 3 pick. But then I don't know what else, what you get behind there. I mean, I think these are rabbit trails we can't go on.
I'm in a Superflex startup. Murray went as QB 15.
Yeah. You and I have the same couple of guys next, but in a different order. You have Tyler Warren at 4, Cam Ward at 5. I had Ward at 4 and Warren at 5. I could see making the case either way. I just figured in Superflex I gave a little bit of an edge to a quarterback who we're fairly certain he's another one. Cam Ward apparently did was it a PlayStation Live or something where he was talking about Treylon Burks being one of the most underrated receivers in the league, and Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears being a couple of the greatest running backs in professional football, and Calvin Ridley.
Guys.
Dude, if there was much of a doubt that he was going to Tennessee, it kind of got ebbed down there, and I expect he's a guy that's going to start from week 1. I think Brian Callahan saw what he wanted to see out of Will Levis. Unless Cam Ward tears something off the bone.
Shows up to his first team meeting with Callahan's wife on his arm, and she's got hickeys all over her neck.
I mean, Callahan may just think that's the cost of keeping his job at this point in time. I don't know. But, I think you and I are pretty well in agreement. Those feel like the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I have McMillan, Warren, and Ward all in the same tier. So if Ward went 3 and McMillan 4 and Warren 5, I'm not going to be going, oh, you're crazy. That's egregious. What are you thinking? It just, I want to, Ward he's had to build up through his career. He's got a lot of experience. I like him. I think he's talented. He's got a strong arm, great mobility, and hasn't always played on good teams. He started off at what? I can't even think of it. It was some crazy little college.
Cam Ward. Oh, yeah.
St. Mary's Mothers of Mercy and Iron Fighting.
I don't know.
And before he went to Washington or Washington State, and then to Miami.
Let me see if I can pull.
But Warren, he just feels like
after 2022 write-up from Campus Kansas, after a stellar career in the FCS with the incarnate word.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, expectations
I was close.
Yeah, well, I mean, I liked yours better, like Mother of Holy Marys. And then you're right, Washington State for 2 years, and then went to Miami. So he definitely got the full gamut of college experience.
He did, coast to coast. But I kind of place Warren ahead of him because Warren's kind of a unicorn. He does a lot of different things. It feels like he'll get the opportunity to show that, I think, early. Whether it sticks around throughout his career, I don't know. But hell, Jonnu Smith still does end arounds.
Let me just say the 2 places that he seems to get mocked the most are the Jets, where I think he would easily become the number 2 in the passing game behind Garrett Wilson, and the Bears. And let me tell you, if that happens with the Bears, you thought I was out on Cole Kmet before. You won't find him on any of my rosters if they take Tyler Warren. It's going to be Michael Mayer. Part of me has trouble believing that the Chicago Bears are going to blow the number 10 pick on a tight end, because Cole Kmet, it may not be my favorite, but I think he's fine, and I feel like they have other needs, but Bears going to do Bear things. So I think beyond the top 5 is where it gets a little more interesting. Feels like there's a little more variation depending on how you feel. So Why don't you give your 6 to 12, which would be essentially the end of the first round, and then I'll give mine, and we can talk about what we have in there.
Well, I'm going to go to 13 since I have
Oh yeah,
those guys all in the same tier. So I got Emeka Ibuka, Travion Henderson, Omarion Hampton, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson, and then Colston Loveland. Again, it's a tier, so you could kind of juggle these guys all around. I think Ibuka is just so refined in what he does, and he's got good size, 6 foot, 206 pounds. You know, he's slightly bigger than Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is his comp and who he replaced in college and played basically the same role. Travion Henderson slotted in at 7, very explosive running back, phenomenal pass blocker. He's going to keep your quarterback clean. Great pass catcher, explosive, can run well. He does sometimes get knocked off balance, runs a little bit high, but man, when he gets the ball, he can just explode. Hampton is kind of the opposite of Henderson. I think Hampton has 3-down ability. Henderson is a good inside runner. I think he's, if I remember correctly, what is he? 5'10", 202. If he had about 6 or 7 more pounds on him, it feels like he would have a little bit more power. But Hampton, 6 foot, 221, he feels like a Pittsburgh Steeler running back is what he feels like. Decent pass catcher, good with the ball. Luther Burden, number 3. I saw a comp for Burden. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is who he was comped to, because a lot of times we keep seeing Deebo Samuel because he did catch a lot of balls at the line of scrimmage. But I like the Brandon Ayuk comp probably a little bit better. I think he's a little more explosive like Ayuk, a little sturdier. Matthew Golden at 10, another guy that's very explosive, told a reporter that he's been dealing with an ankle injury since before the combine. So he feels like if he'd have been fully healthy, he'd have ran even faster than the 4.29. Whatever. Quinshon Judkins next. He's kind of a poor man's Omarion Hampton. Good inside runner, got good instincts. Has good speed, but not great speed. He can be caught. We've seen that in his time at Ohio State. He's one of those guys kind of like Emmitt Smith. Like, he bursts through the line, can get a 50-yard touchdown. He's probably not going to get an 80-yard touchdown, but he'll get you the 40 or 50-yarder. Dylan Sampson, a little bit smaller guy, but he has a nose for the end zone, good inside runner, good all-around running back. And then my last one, Colston Loveland. I think the argument could probably be made that Loveland could be bumped up a little in the way that I have them ordered. But like I said, this is a tier. It's a big tier of 8 players. And so, like, if I'm sitting at, 107, unless I'm, like, in love with the guy there, I may be okay to move back to 111, 112 and take one of these guys and pick up a second-round pick, though second-round picks don't pan out all that often. But it's a good tier. It's going to have some very productive players in it. And I think it's 8 guys that are going to go into the league pushing for playing time.
So, I mean, you and I have essentially the same idea in that we have a couple of receivers. We have the rest of our top 5 running backs and Loveland in there. I have a quarterback instead of a third receiver. And obviously you and I have a little bit different running backs. You're much higher on Dylan Sampson than I am. I have, Omarion Hampton, future Denver Bronco at 6, and then Luther Burden, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins,
Emeka Ibuka. I'm surprised Omarion Hampton, future Denver Bronco, wasn't even higher.
Well, I mean, there are some I guess depending on if I had a real glaring running back need, and I was picking like 4 or 5, maybe I in terms of prospects and Superflex, they're probably better in this middle round. But I do think once you hit, between 5 and 12, the gap between prospects isn't that huge. I would probably draft more based on roster construction and need than just purely like, well, I absolutely, like if I have pick number 7 and all of the 6 picks in front of me went, and I really need running back and I'm sitting great at wide receiver, I'm not going to say, well, if I don't take Luther Burden and take Travion Henderson instead, I've made a colossal error. That's where I might do some shifting. But I have Henderson and Judkins then at 9, Abuka at 10. I have Shadur Sanders at 11. He seems like he's picking up steam to go to a couple of different places where I think he would end up starting. I'm still not wild about Sanders and his NFL future, but a lot of teams seem to be interested. And if you're in Superflex and you can get one of the starting quarterbacks, that's not bad, especially end of the first round. Then I have Loveland, and then I have Caleb Johnson as my 5th running back, so he would be kind of in that 13. So all those guys really in consideration, mid to late first round picks, I think. Why don't you go to your next group?
So this is where Shadur Sanders comes in. It seems on paper there's a lot of things to like about him. He has an ability to deal with the sorry, I'm looking for my quarterback notes. He's had to deal with the specter of being Deion Sanders' son and all the attention that brings. I think it's ridiculous that they're retiring his number. They're
retiring his number, I think, next Saturday.
Ludicrous. But when I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski when it comes to the type of quarterback they want. It feels like Andrew Berry is probably more in the Jalen Milroe camp. He wants an athletic quarterback with a big arm that can get out of the pocket and make things happen, versus Stefanski, who wants a guy that's going to, run the play action. Everything's timing, doesn't have to have the big arm, get the ball out. And so there's a little bit of disconnect there. But ultimately, it feels like because Jimmy Haslam made the Deshaun Watson move, that these two guys have a long leash to be able to work through this mess and put a team together. And the fact that they did make it to the playoffs a couple years ago, I think holds some sway with Haslam. So if they were to go Shadur Sanders, I think with Joe Flacco there, they could play Flacco a few games. Kenny Pickett, I don't think his perceived skill set is all that much different than Shadur Sanders. Not a great athlete, play action pass, timing quarterback, okay arm, but not great arm. It feels like they're very similar in that regard. Then I follow up with Trey Harris, big wide receiver. For me, he's a little, I like Jaden Higgins as well, who is in this tier with him. But I just think Harris is a little bit more refined as a receiver than Jaden Higgins. He's able to set up his breaks a little better, change speeds a little better. I've got Caleb Johnson slotted in between the two of them. I'm not sure. He's an upright runner. I might just be too low on him, but right now this is where I have him, so I'm probably not going to end up with any shares of Caleb Johnson. I say that knowing that I am in 17, 18, 19 dynasty leagues. And so often in the rookie draft process, I will draft one of these guys where other people are taking them that I'm not as high on, just to get a share of them. Say, well, let's diversify and grab this guy. Then I got Basil Tootin, explosive, very fast, kind of one of these spark plug Ray Rice kind of backs, decent pass catcher, little ball security issues because he's got kind of small hands. Jackson Dart, so Dart and Sanders are in the same tier, and we're starting to see them, with Sanders falling, rumors of him falling, and Dart has kind of had a pretty clean draft season. Dart's biggest thing is where I think Sanders probably can step in and start for several teams based on scheme fit. Jackson Dart has ran that, one read RPO type of offense most of his college career. The numbers look good, but it doesn't always translate great to the NFL. But he's got a lot of really good NFL traits, pretty good arm, some mobility. So if he can refine those other skill set things and get comfortable with the more complicated offenses you see in the NFL, I think Dart can get on up there a little more. And then my last one in this tier is wide receiver, Alec Eomanor. Another big guy, good work ethic, pretty nice route runner, makes acrobatic catches. I think, though, at this point at 20, it's kind of a crapshoot on the player.
Yeah, in about that 14 to 20 range, I have similar. I have grabbed a couple of wide receivers. I have a couple more running backs. I think this is where you and I start to diverge a little bit. I have more tight ends and quarterbacks up in the top 25 than you both, because it's Superflex for quarterbacks. I'm starting to feel like, especially with more of them being invited to the actual draft, that we're going to see a couple of these guys go late first or early second.
To be clear, you have one more quarterback than I do.
Yeah, but I mean, I have quarterbacks a little higher than you too. I had Shedeur Sanders up. I would be taking him at the end of the first round. I don't think he is. I think he's probably going to either the New York Giants or the New Orleans Saints. So it doesn't seem like he's going to slide out of the top 10 there. God, pity for, we should start like a prayer circle for the Giants fans if they end up with Sanders, Jameis Winston, and Russell Wilson. That's the team that should be on Hard Knocks. It won't happen, but that's who should be on Hard Knocks. But in my group, this is where I have Matthew Golden. I have Devin Neal at running back, Jaden Higgins. I have Jackson Dart then at 17, Trey Harris. And then I have Mason Taylor. Some people are very high on Taylor, our actual campus to Canton rookie guy. They have Mason Taylor only 2 spots behind Colson Loveland, pretty high up in tier 2 of the rookies in the rookie guide. And then I have Cam Scatterbo. I think all those guys, second guys, I'm probably taking in the early, mid to late second. Alec Eomanor is who I have right behind Scatterbo at 21. I think you have them reversed, but those are probably a group I feel better about. And then kind of toward the back end, I have some more varied picks. The remainder of my top 25, I have a couple running backs, TJ Giddens and Damian Martinez. Be curious to see where they end up. And then I have Elijah Arroyo. I think Arroyo and Taylor at tight end are actually going to go in the second round in NFL drafts. I think there are a lot of interesting spots for them to land. And then Jalen Milroe, who they just invited to the draft, is going to the draft in person. I'm starting to think that, I know you mentioned Cleveland trading back in to get to Sanders. I don't think they'll be able to get there. I think they're going to stay where they are, and that Milroe's been one of the prospects that they've been working out in this process. I would not be surprised to see him go in that good old Will Levis Memorial spot at 202.
I can't say that I disagree with you, because it does feel like the Browns have to do something at quarterback. And first round pick, probably not, but that early second rounder, it would seem to make sense for them to, if they've got a guy they like there, to go there. My last tier in this top 25 got Cam Scatterboo, Devin Neal, Jalen Royal, Jalen Neal, and Jack Beck. I went back and forth when we did our wide receiver rankings with Beck and Restrepo. And ultimately, while Restrepo seems to get decent separation, he's just he's a small, stocky guy that's really slow. And while he's pretty quick, he's really slow. And so I ended up putting Beck over him, who I think he's just a bigger, faster Restrepo, and I liked him. Scatterboo, Dynasty Nerds has Scatterboo at RB5. They love him. I've seen some comps to him. I think it was Thor Nystrom put out his draft day 500, where he ranks 500 draft candidates, NFL draft, not just fantasy. And he comps each one to a former player, and he comps Scatterboo to David Montgomery. I think Scatterboo is maybe a little bit slower than Montgomery, but again, when you're a 220-pound running back and you make your hay with your vision and your ability to cut, your job is to turn 3-yard gains into, or no yard gains into 3-yard gains, 3-yard gains into 8-yard gains, and 8-yard gains into 15-yard gains. Your job isn't to turn 4-yard gains into 50-yard gains. And I think Scatterboo delivers that. Devin Neal is pretty similar. He's got good size, can catch the ball a bit. Again, in this area where late in the second round, you're taking a crapshoot on whether or not these players are going to develop for fantasy. And ultimately, my first 3 out are all running backs, 2 of which you have in your top 25. And I ultimately went with receivers to round this out, because I just think they have a little better opportunity to become fantasy relevant. I think running backs sometimes will fade out a little bit quicker. So that's my bottom 5 of the top 25. Scatterboo, Neal, Royals, Neal,
Yeah,
Beck.
I think the real difference, you and I have the same.
Jalen Noel, not Neal. I keep saying
Yeah,
that.
Noel. You and I have the same number of running backs in our top 25. We have slightly different. You have Dylan Sampson and Baishul Tut, and I have a couple of different guys. I think it's Giddens and Martinez that I have in there that you don't have.
And I don't hate your ranking of Arroyo and Mason Taylor either. I think
that was kind of the difference. So the real difference between your top 25 and mine is you had 3 more receivers than I do, and I filled those slots with 2 tight ends, and I took a shot on Milroe. I went back and forth. I didn't originally, when we drafted this, have him in the top 25, and I moved him up to 25 because it just feels like the momentum is building. And honestly, if he goes to Cleveland, I know they have Flacco and they have Kenny Pickett, who has said some astoundingly confident, building things about himself. But I think
there's love you, nobody will.
There's a non-zero chance that if he goes to Cleveland, he ends up playing as a rookie. So I just looking at, I guess I can see the case you make for your other receivers, and there were times where I thought about putting them or another running back in, but I guess I didn't feel confident about anybody. Not as confident as I don't know if it was Pro Football Focus or somebody that had Jack Beck going pick number 10 overall to the Bears.
That had to be a typo.
It was not. It was the wildest mock draft I think I've seen yet. There was a lot of puzzling picks, and you know what? You never know. I feel like every year when we feel so set on where we think everyone's going to land, and then things just don't go the way you're expecting. So,
Like, we're just coffee table draft pundits. You know, we digest a whole bunch of stuff, filter it through our smooth brains, and then spit this stuff out. And then we win some fantasy championships.
hopefully.
And we'd like you to win some too.
Well, and the great news is we're that much closer to the NFL draft, which means we're that much closer to rookie draft season, which is why on Monday we are going to look at our final pre-draft mock drafts. We'll do a single QB because that's always kind of telling how people are feeling about receivers, tight ends, and running backs. And we will do another Superflex one, so we'll kind of look and see where folks are lining up in those drafts as we head into draft day, and then we will be back next Friday, obviously breaking down the first round. I'm sure there will be surprises.
Speaking of draft day, I watched that movie for the first time ever last week.
You mean Cleveland Browns porn?
I thought it was great. I loved it.
It's because it
essentially I don't watch movies.
I mean,
like you do.
No, I love that movie too. I watch it every year. I own that movie. My wife likes it too, but I wouldn't be surprised if you like it more than most because it literally is the dream scenario for the Cleveland Browns.
Well, Jackie and I were sitting around and we were like, hey, you want to watch a movie? And she's like, sure. And so she's scrolling through and she's like, oh, you want to watch this? And she picked Draft Day. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, well, I've never watched it. I hear some good things and a lot of awful things about it. Why not? You know, we're hanging out. I watched it and I was like, man, well, I'm not sure about the plausibility of, especially the last trade. I'm like, I enjoyed this movie. I had myself a damn good time. I should probably have watched it a lot sooner. But again, I also don't watch hardly any movies.
On a scale of 1 to 10, if the Browns ended the first 2 days of the actual NFL draft taking Travis Hunter in the first round, Travion Henderson at 202, and then grabbing Will Howard in the third round, how would you feel?
I'd feel good. I would love Howard to sit a year behind Joe Flacco.
Well, I mean, if you end up waiting, he and Quinn Ewers are two of the guys that are potential development, because you said you get the feeling that Stefanski would be happier with maybe more of a traditional pocket passer. And you can't say that Cleveland doesn't need a running back because I believe on the roster currently they only have Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong, and I do not see that as being a Kevin Stefanski backfield.
No, I would like it a lot. I think they need, do they have some other needs? Probably. But no, I think Joe Flacco with Travis Hunter and Cedric Tillman.
And Jerry Jeudy. David Njoku. I mean, you have
Travion Henderson to that.
You have the makings of some, if that offensive line can stay healthier, because I feel like last year, almost every week, one or both of the tackles was questionable or out.
Yeah. They've moved DeJuan Jones to left tackle. That makes me nervous. Yeah, I think he's a good NFL player, but I think at 6'9", 375 pounds, that's a right tackle, not a left tackle. He's good. I don't know that he's got the the foot speed. I mean, it takes you a day and a half to get around him, but some of these guys have the speed to do that. But yeah, no, DeJuan Jones is a big son of a gun.
Well, that'll do it for us today. You have all weekend. Hopefully, you get some time to celebrate with your family, or you can kick back and watch. Draft Day is currently streaming on both Peacock and Netflix, so you always have that option. It is always a good watch to see Kevin Costner draft Chadwick Boseman and Arian Foster. You know, it leaves you with a warm feeling inside, especially since they put one over on Seattle. And you need to know, the real question we should be asking these teams is, have they done due diligence, and how many people went to Shadur Sanders' birthday party?
Valid point.
Yeah.
Valid point.
Well, you guys have a wonderful holiday weekend. We will be back on Monday talking a little mock draft. And guess what? The NFL draft right around the corner. It doesn't get much better than that. Till then, you guys have a wonderful weekend.